I'm Frank Arson, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. The U.S. men's national team is out of the World Cup. They crashed out in the round of 16 with a 4-1 loss to Belgium. And on today's show, we're going to break down what went wrong, how we'd grade the team's overall performance at the World Cup, the players who saw the biggest stock up and down over the competition, Poch's future, and what's next for this USMNT. Joining me today is Larry Henry Jr. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer. All right, Larry, so not the ending that we really wanted to see here. What do you think went so wrong against Belgium last night?
Yeah, first off, Frank, good to be back with you. I wish it was under a better circumstance with a U.S. win, but yeah, it's just a kind of a sad, disappointing ending to what was at one point a very exciting and maybe even inspirational tournament for them. I think the big thing that just went wrong is. Obviously the mistakes were huge, right? We were talking beforehand that the goals that they let up, were all mental mistakes or errors or breakdowns at the back. I think the Matt Freeze error for the third goal really kind of was the backbreaker because they were still, only a goal down. And the fact that, that kind of really iced it up for Belgium. I mean, yes, the U.S. kind of had some, half chances as the match went on. And I know, Berhalter had a good attempt. Balogun had a good chance, but it just kind of went downhill, from that point on. And I think it just kind of shows, right, that the U.S. still have a long way to go to maybe get to being like a quarterfinal team or a semifinal team at the World Cup. It seems like the round of 16 seems to always be where they kind of fall out, right? They lost that, to Belgium several years ago. They lost in the round of 16 in 2022. They go out in the round of 16 in 2026. So, yeah, I just think that maybe the stage was a little too high for them at this point. The big time players, too, I thought didn't really have a great day. Christian Pulisic being one of them. I mean, in a game like that, you want your leaders and your big time players to step up, maybe deliver a signature performance, and it was really anything but that for Christian Pulisic. Gets subbed out after the third goal with an ankle injury. Was obviously was very visibly upset and in pain on the bench, but was frustrated as well. He didn't create a chance, didn't have a shot. Lost most of his individual duels. So really kind of a sad way for him to go out in this tournament too. So really kind of a whole mixture of things that went wrong for this team that really led to the loss last night.
Yeah, I would have been disappointed no matter what. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, this is the thing. We make it to the round of 16 and we can't get past it, and so here we are again. But it was just that the most disappointing thing was just the performance. I mean, I hate to use this word because it sounds mean, but it looked like a choke job to me. I mean, you mentioned like they maybe couldn't handle the pressure of the big stage. I don't know what else it could have been, because I want to recognize Belgium has the quality. Of course they do, but they didn't do anything I didn't expect. I didn't even see them. Any top team like that's going to cause you some problems. But the mistakes I saw the U.S. making, they couldn't even get like their first touches right. You'd see somebody pass a ball to one of the players in wide open space, and they'd have a bad first touch and lose the ball, or the ball would go out of bounds, or it'd immediately get turned over. You'd see somebody like Pulisic trying to dribble around somebody, and the ball just like shoots off their foot, and they lose the ball. I mean, it was like these basic like blocking and tackling, to use like kind of a football analogy, things like they couldn't even do the little things, and it was like this team, they got to the biggest stage of their lives and they choked. I mean, they played their worst game in my opinion. I don't know if it was Just the pressure was too big. They were putting too much pressure on themselves. I don't know if the Balogun thing ended up like somehow like getting in their minds and messing them up. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of at a loss for words, but it it just seemed like a choke job to me. I mean, am I wrong?
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, I think it was, going into that game, whether Balogun was going to be available or not. I mean, I was telling, colleagues of mine at the France match I was at on Saturday, and I was saying I still think they're going to win. I just, the confidence was high in the group. Belgium obviously needed a very late comeback against Senegal to advance. They weren't really that convincing in their group stage matches, where I thought the U.S. were, particularly good against Paraguay and Australia and Turkey. I kind of throw out because they made so many changes and didn't really need to play that match. So, I still thought they were going to find a way to win. The home crowd behind them. They've been behind them throughout the whole tournament. Players are going to step up. Everyone's going to be good. Then you add Balogun back in the mix, and it's like, okay, great. Now we get our best player from the tournament back in, and he's probably got a point to prove and everything. And it just seemed like it went spiraled out of control, and really just kind of looked like maybe it was even like a resemblance of, could have been like Pochettino's first game in charge, rather his 30 I think first game or second game in charge it is now. But yeah, it was just really disappointing, and again too, Belgium, too, they didn't even really have to play their A guys at parts of it. Kevin De Bruyne went to the bench, Jeremy Doku went to the bench. They made changes, I think, to deal with the US's physicality, in the lineup, and it seemed like that worked. It seemed like you said, US were making errors, balls going out of play, turnovers. The guys who maybe led by example in the earlier games, like, Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, the energy type guys weren't, Belgium were meeting that and exceeding that. So, just a really kind of sour ending to the tournament where, you think, maybe if they play one of their better games, we're talking about them preparing to face Spain on Friday, and where do you go from there? But instead, now we're like, okay, well, did they take a step back in the entire tournament?
Yeah. And I don't want to take anything away from Belgium. I mean, they played a top-notch game and they deserve to win. And I guess I'm just so disappointed. I would have liked to seen what a game looked like when we came out and put on a good performance. Belgium came out and put on a good performance. What does that look like? Who wins? Like a real measuring stick. I mean, this was just, we didn't even show up, and man, just disappointed. So that was last night. Let's take a step back though and look at the overall World Cup performance, because it seemed like, if you would have talked to us yesterday before the game, we would have been fired up about how great this team is looking and what they're doing. When you look at the big picture of how this team performed in the World Cup, what grade would you give them?
Yeah, I think I'd give them a B. I wouldn't give them an A. I wouldn't think that last night's performance against Belgium dropped them down to a C either. I still think they showed a lot of good things in this tournament, right? Sometimes that pressure's on when you're at home in a World Cup to deliver. And I don't think anybody expected this U.S. team to, just because they're at home, to go out and run the table. There's still a lot of very talented teams that are better than them, right? Belgium, Spain, Argentina, France, Morocco, the list kind of goes on and on. But I still think they showed a lot of good things, right? Some players took very important steps forward. Falarin Balogun, I thought him and Malik Tillman were 1A and 1B for players at the tournament for them. I mean, they just, Balogun, I thought, was sensational in those opening games, right? Scoring some big goals, forced the own goal against Australia. Yes, he had kind of a slow performance against Belgium, a quiet performance, but, he was at points going up against 2-3 defenders on every time that the US would try to counter or get into the attack. So you can only do, I think, so much, and maybe that's a tactical thing, but Tillman, I thought, even in that game last night, they're down 3-1, even 4-1. He's out there fighting. He's winning fouls. He's taking guys on. He's dribbling. He's trying to make things happen. He was the player of the game for them last night. And I know there wasn't that many to pick from, but he was the one, he scored the goal via deflection, but it was still, he went for it. He had the free kick goal as well against Bosnia. Herzegovina, which was sensational. So those two were players of the tournament for me, and I still think they showed fight. They showed good, unity and togetherness throughout the tournament. So there are some positives to take. I still think it's a tournament for them. They beat Paraguay. They rolled through them. They took care of business against Australia. The Turkey match, I wasn't really too harsh to judge them because they made so many changes and so many of the key guys were rested because of yellow cards. And then the Bosnia match, knockout game, do or die, they showed up for that as well. And, Balogun was important in that one as well with the goals. So, I'd say a B. I think that's a good grade for them, given how things kind of ended as well.
Yeah. I gave him a C, Larry, because C is average. And I agree with you. There were some positives from the tournament, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But at the end of the day, they did the exact same team, the exact same thing as pretty much every USMNT team has done at the World Cup, in the last 20, 30 years, save that 2002 team that made it to the quarterfinals. I mean, it seemed like a lot of talk. And at the end of the day, here we are in the exact same place that it seems like I am at the end of every World Cup, and you could even argue it got worse. 2010, they lose an extra time, round of 16 to Ghana. 2014, they lose an extra time, round of 16 to Belgium. 2018, we didn't make it, of course. 2022, round of 16, lost to Netherlands. A little bit more of a gap there, 3-1. And then this match, we just get blown out, completely blown out of the water. So I'm feeling a little sour today. But I actually think C is a pretty good grade because, I think they had everything. I thought about rating them lower because they had everything on their side to go and do something that a U.S. team had never done before. They got a good group stage draw that was very reasonable. They got Bosnia in the round of 32, very reasonable. They got Belgium in the round of 16. Great team, again, but not one of the top 5 elite teams, that they could have got. I mean, look at Mexico got England, in their round of 16. So I think they should have done more than previous teams, but they didn't. But on the other hand, they did give us some positives. They won 3 matches in a World Cup, first time it's ever been done. And then I think they gave all of us as fans that opening night against Paraguay, which I think almost everybody will tell you who's followed this team, has been a fan of this team. That was one of the most enjoyable matches anybody's ever watched a U.S. team play. You know what I mean? That match will live with me for the rest of my life, probably. When I think about being a fan and what's special about being a fan, that night felt special, and the team gave us that, and that was awesome to do that on the opening night, the World Cup. You think about it, Canada, who tied, in their home opener, on home soil. So I don't know, but at the end of the day, Larry, it's here we are again,
Yeah, no. No, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it leaves you with that sense of what if or what could have been, right?
Yeah.
If they had, stepped up to the plate, knocked it out of the park against Belgium, exercised some demons as well against Belgium, like you said it from 2014. And then also, they hadn't beat Belgium since the 1930 World Cup, which is crazy to think about. It'd been that long now. It's 7 straight losses to Belgium. They got thumped by them in March too, which I know a lot of the players had said, we're not really thinking about that match, and you can't, because then you start thinking about every match like that. Oh, last time we played Mexico or last time we played Canada. But yeah, I think, even then there were some signs of what Belgium could do to them, and it seemed like, there was just more of that. But yeah, I mean that I will fully agree with you too that night against Paraguay, that it was special. I mean, I know it's Paraguay, and it wasn't like they were playing some top dog in the opening game of the World Cup. Like, Brazil played Morocco the first game, but they still went out. They did their business. It was one of those really special nights. I remember I didn't want to go to sleep really that night because
Mm-hmm.
it was like
It was
you were on the.
beautiful.
It was awesome. It was a high. What a high, right? To kick it off on home soil and to deliver that performance, and then even like the Gio Reyna goal was like the icing on the cake. But yeah, it just seems like they kind of got the rug pulled out from under them against Belgium. That's for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about some players, because this World Cup is so important for players' careers. It can completely change the trajectory of a player. Let's do a stock up and stock down on the player pool. I mean, give me at least one guy who you think their stock went up quite a bit because of this World Cup.
Yeah, I mentioned him already, and I'll mention him again. Malik Tillman. I thought he, coming into this tournament, we knew what Malik Tillman was about, right? And it seemed like we really didn't see at times the whole picture with him. We saw glimpses at times with the national team. I remember at the Gold Cup last summer, and then throughout some friendlies. His club season really didn't, with Leverkusen really didn't take off maybe as high as people would have expected for what they paid for him. So maybe there was a little bit of worry about, could this not maybe not be Malik Tillman's only time with the national team, but if he doesn't take his game up to another level this summer, maybe we need to look elsewhere for some creative pieces. And I thought he was, just really outstanding throughout this tournament in terms of his just showing what he's able to do on the ball, taking guys on, drawing fouls, creating chances. I thought that goal that he set Balogun up for in the Paraguay game was, yeah, I think it made it 3-0 at that point, where I think we had talked even on an earlier show. It's like, they're just going to ease into halftime, take a 2-0 lead. And it's like, no, he just turns his head, boom, one kick up the field, and then Balogun makes things happen and scores. His awareness is definitely higher than most players, and I thought he was sensational. He got the goal against Bosnia, which probably did him a world of good. And then he scored again last night, which was really just a consolation at that point. But yeah, I think him and Balogun, neck and neck player of the tournament for the U.S. And maybe he gets it a little bit because maybe he gets that nod over Balogun just for the fact that we kind of know what Balogun's capable of. We know that he can score goals. He had been scoring goals for the U.S. Throughout different windows in 2025. But I don't think many would have expected Malik Tillman to have the tournament like he did if you asked me this time last year.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do give him a break for last night, because I do think he was probably the one player last night against Belgium who came ready to play. He scored the unbelievable free kick. Throughout the match, he looked like he was working his tail off. And so all the negatives I'm saying about all the other players, I don't want to say that about Tillman because he did show up last night. And I agree with you. He came into this World Cup kind of like, I don't know, kind of on the fringe of the starting lineup, and we're not sure exactly how he's going to contribute. And now he's a player that I look at as one of the best players on the team. He's a player. There's no way you'd take him out of the starting lineup. I mean, he was sensational. So 100% agree with you there. The other guy I want to mention is Sebastian Berhalter, because he's another guy that I think a lot of people had him even on the bubble to make the roster. He essentially turned into the first guy, or one of the first guys Poch is going to bring in off the bench. Scored a goal, brought good energy to the team every time he was on the field, looked good out there. And I think he solidified his spot, not as an edge player, but as a really contributing member, of this team. He came in to the biggest stage and overperformed. And so I was really happy to see him, because I mean, how can you not cheer for that guy? Okay, what about a stock down? Who's a player, at least one player that had a stock down in your mind because of the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I should say stock down, but I just think like in terms of the overall World Cup and what we expected to what we got, I really think Christian Pulisic did not have a good World Cup at all. I mean, I know he he had that injury right in the first game, and that maybe played a factor into the rest of his tournament. Right, he missed the Australia match. He was able to play against Turkey, play against Bosnia, play against Belgium. Was really ineffective last night. Didn't really seem all that up for it. And then it seemed like after he had that kind of collision with Yuri Tillemans on that play, which I know a lot of fans I think wanted a penalty or wanted a free kick, and it went the other way. It seemed like he was kind of out of his game at that point. He was injured. You want your big guys to step up, and Balogun, I thought, had a really good tournament. Tillman had a good tournament. I thought the energy that McKennie and Adams brought throughout the tournament were very high. Maybe not as much against Belgium, but the whole team wasn't really that great against Belgium. But Pulisic didn't really deliver what you would have wanted from your star creative player at a home World Cup. He gets, what is it, one assist. He helped kind of force that own goal as well against Paraguay. But yeah, if you asked him, I know he's talked about it. He was very disappointed himself. He wanted to do so much more for this team. I mean, you only get so many chances to play at a World Cup, and some players don't ever get the chance to play at a World Cup on home soil. I think if you ask Christian Pulisic, he'd probably want this tournament back. He'd want to redo. He'd want to do it all over again. So yeah, I think kind of a little bit of a stock down for him. And then I guess one other guy I want to just give a quick shout at was Ricardo Pepi. I know Balogun is the number 9, and I think will be the number 9 going forward. Ricardo Pepi, I think, did not help his chances whatsoever in terms of being the guy that's behind him. He came into the World Cup. He was a really good game against, was it Senegal, before the World Cup, and thinking, okay, maybe this kind of turns a new leaf for him, right? Because he missed some opportunities in 2025, didn't have tons of chances, and then it seemed like he gets the start against Australia, wasn't that effective in the final third, gets another start against Turkey in that game, doesn't really offer too much. I don't know what Haji Wright has to do to kind of boost himself up in front of Ricardo Pepi, but it really shouldn't be too much, because Ricardo Pepi, didn't really bring that much to the World Cup to me. And I think, in another universe, if we're talking about Patrick Agyemang being healthy for this summer's World Cup, maybe Ricardo Pepi's not there, just for the fact that, Agyemang, I think, had a good shout to make it before his injury, right? His physicality, what he brings to the team. He was big over the Gold Cup. Got probably easily more chances than Ricardo Pepi in 2025. So, I think whether Pochettino stays on as head coach or not, or whoever takes over, that's going to be the biggest thing, is trying to find some scoring depth for this team behind Folarin and Balogun. Because if you say he gets hurt or say something happens, they're in a very worrying spot at the number 9. If Haji Wright played, I think, less than 10 minutes the whole tournament, and Ricardo Pepi, I don't think really even had a shot on goal, or maybe even was just one shot on goal in the whole tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you on Pepi, and I'm a big Pepi fan. And he got plenty of opportunities this World Cup to kind of show what he can do, and he didn't really show much. And I think back to even the Turkey match, where he got the start. There were several times where I saw him get opportunities, and it looked like he just got bossed by the center backs of Turkey. Like they just took him out of the play instantaneously, and it made me wonder, okay, is his peak, I hope this isn't the case, but is his peak Eredivisie? Because we're talking about him getting a move to Fulham or some Premier League team potentially this summer. And I'm like, okay, is this a sign that he's going to struggle at a higher level, of competition? I hope not. Maybe he just had a bad World Cup. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that I think stocks went down a little bit. And then Pulisic, I mean, what can you say? I mean, you thought he was going to come out a big star, from this World Cup, and he really didn't have a star-making, a star performance at this World Cup. I can't think of really a highlight you could show of him doing something great, at this World Cup. He had good moments, of course, but he didn't have a big goal or a big moment in a big game, and didn't even play that much. When it comes down to it because of the injuries, and so was a little bit disappointed there. The one other guy I'll mention is Tim Weah. Because I feel like coming into the tournament, he was the guy I thought, along with Ricardo Pepi, would be the first. I thought him and Pepi would be the first two off the bench for pretty much any game. I even thought he might get a start. He did get a start against, I guess, Turkey, but I thought he might even just get rotated with Sergiño Dest because I just thought the difference between those two, they're just such top quality players. But he actually did get some opportunities, looked bad, and then Poch stopped subbing him in to any game. I mean, you think about the match last night. They could have used some speed. They could have used some goals, of course. Tim Weah stayed on the bench, So it's like as the tournament went on, Poch seemed to rely on him less and less. And then he did the match he did play against Turkey. Didn't he get pulled like shortly after halftime? He was like the first player that got subbed out, and so he didn't have a good game. And so his stock, I think, really went down over this World Cup.
Yeah, but yeah, Frank too. It's great you bring up Tim Weah because he was also on my list. But it just seems too. I'm curious going forward, and we'll get into that. But I'm curious going forward whether it's Pochettino or whoever takes over next. Where these guys that were maybe very important under Berhalter and that maybe were depth pieces under Pochettino, where their spots are going to be heading into 2030, like a Tim Weah, like a Brendan Aronson, who always seemed to be a guy that was off the bench, could bring some energy, could bring a great work rate. We didn't see a lot of him as well this tournament. Ricardo Pepi's another. So I'm curious. And with these young guys, right, these young guys who didn't make the World Cup or, experienced guys who didn't make the World Cup, like a Diego Luna, like a Tanner Tessman, a Cardoso, young guys like Gozo and Julian Hall and some others, they're the guys that are going to be chomping at the bit to be there for 2030.
Yeah, 100%.
So and there's no guarantee that whether it's Pochettino or not, that these guys, like an Aronson, like a Pepe, like a Weah, not saying their time's up by any means, but you got some hungry younger players even behind you now that are like, okay, we saw how you performed or how little you performed. We're gonna come for your spots now.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. A lot of these guys, they may be out of the national team. The national team, whoever the new coach is, may decide, the federation may decide, okay, it's time to move on from some of these players and move on to some younger players. So much that will be decided by who the next coach is. So let me ask you this for kind of our next thing to get into is let's talk about Pochettino. His contract is over now that the World Cup is done. Do you think he should be rehired for the next cycle?
I think he should. And I know that, I think while the end result at this World Cup was poor, I don't think it was particularly maybe Pochettino's fault for that. I think that you could tell through the tournament that he, really kind of cares and enjoys being with this team, some really cool scenes throughout the World Cup, right? Singing Country Roads with the fans and, a lot of fans cheering his name during his interviews and stuff. Throwing out the first pitch in Seattle at the Mariners game was pretty cool. You can tell that it's his, first national team opportunity and that he really enjoyed it. And I think he brought a sense of, excitement for the players in terms of, okay, we know what this guy is about. We know he's coached some of the biggest clubs in the world and some of the biggest tournaments in the world, has won a lot of, big trophies, PSG and Chelsea and so forth. And he gives you kind of that extra sense of excitement and belief, right? That you could do something special. And I think the biggest thing for me is, for the players that didn't make it, they probably know that, he's watching them, whether they're in MLS, whether they're in Europe, whether they're, wherever they play their club football, he, as long as you're playing at a high level and you're playing week in and week out, you're going to get your opportunities. So I think everybody in the player pool is probably like, okay, I want to be with that guy. I want to play under him. So I do think he will come back. There's obviously been reports that he had already been offered a 4-year extension for the next cycle. That was already reported, and then he came out and said that we're going to focus on the World Cup right now. And then last night he said that we're going to take some time to kind of rest, take a breather, look at everything, and then we'll make a decision. I don't know too at club level who would be in the mix for him right now. I mean, AC Milan was a big one. They've obviously filled that role with Ruben Amorim. He was on I guess, a short list for Real Madrid before Jose Mourinho got brought back. I don't know what kind of options are there for him in terms of at club level. So who would make the move and where he'd want to go. But I think he'll come back. I really do. I think he knows that this project isn't done. Now they're going to have to go through another grueling qualification process like they did heading into 2022. So I think that'll just give him more time to really work with this team, work with U.S. Soccer, and kind of grow this program forward for after his time with them.
Yeah. I'm torn on it, Larry, to be honest. I mean, I think he's done a lot of good things. Number one being that he made everybody compete for their spot. There was a lot of these guys that I think felt like they had their spot secured when he came in, and he made everybody feel like he didn't treat anybody special. He made every single player. He didn't treat Christian Pulisic special. He didn't treat anybody special. He treated everyone the same, and I think he really improve the competitive level of the player pool, in here. And he obviously he cares the human side of it. He excels on. But there's two big problems I have. Number one, if I'm looking for hard evidence to write down a bulleted list of what he did better than previous coaches in terms of results, I have a hard time doing that. His World Cup performance, he made to the round of 16. You just compare him to Greg Berhalter, for example. He did the exact same thing that Greg Berhalter did in his first cycle as the U.S. men's national team head coach. He made to the round of 16, got beat pretty handily by a top European opponent. But at least I feel like Greg returned us to the elite level of CONCACAF, where we were winning Nations League, we were winning Gold Cup. We became the top dog in at least our own region. And Poch didn't do that. He didn't win any competitions. I mean, we made to the final of the Gold Cup. We got 4th place in the CONCACAF Nations League while he was there. And so a lot of the things that we talk about with Poch, they sound good. But I'm in terms of results, he really didn't deliver anything special, And the other thing is I just don't see him making it a full cycle. I mean, 4 years. I mean, he may sign on, and he may put in a good couple years. But just think about all the times Man United's job is going to come open, and Tottenham's job is going to come open, and all these other big clubs around the world. Their jobs are going to come open. And who's always going to be near the top of their list? Mauricio Pochettino. And so can he last 4 years if given the job? I have my doubts about that. And so while I wouldn't be disappointed if he was hired, if they moved on from him, if he moved on, I wouldn't be disappointed either. My preference would be to hire an American coach whose dream job is to coach the U.S. men's national team. That's the number one job they could possibly think of having in their lifetime. And somebody that you could count on being there for all 4 years, focused on the project. I don't know who that is. Is it a Steve Cherundolo, somebody like that? I don't have an obvious candidate in my mind, but I can see this going either way. And I'm honestly torn about which way I'd like it to go. I mean, do you feel like he did a better job than Greg Berhalter did in his first cycle?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for me to say that he, obviously bigger name, a lot longer history coaching in Europe, but Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, he didn't win the Nations League, didn't win the Gold Cup. You know, yeah, just goes to the round of 16. I think the two most important things that he did for me was, and you touched on, with one of them was, he's given a lot of the players, I think, a lot of players in the pool, whether you're 17 years old or 35 years old, as long as you're playing, you're going to have a chance to get in there. So I do like that. I think it shouldn't be the same 26 guys every window unless, unless he gives that decision, hey, these are the best 26 guys right now. I do like the fact that he gives others chances and maybe guys that wouldn't have got it under a Berhalter. And I think, the belief too that he's kind of instilled maybe in some of the players to take their games to another level is important. But yeah, I mean, those are, I think, a little bit more maybe moral victories than the actual results on the field. I'm curious too, because I know you said too about him lasting a full 4 years. I know some fans had messaged me even after the game, and they're like, I'd bring him on board, but I'd give him through the Gold Cup next summer and
Mm.
say like, can you win the Nations League this fall into the spring and then win the Gold Cup, and then go from there before qualifying, because obviously you don't want to get mixed up in that changing coaches during a qualifying cycle, and everything. It gets very very tricky, during a qualifying cycle. So you want to obviously have something locked in for that. So yeah, and obviously the Nations League's not far away, and then the Gold Cup next summer, and then obviously too, with the reports about Copa America being, I guess, 2028, which could be on U.S. soil or is going to be on U.S. soil. Yeah, it's another big opportunity for them as well to bring home some silverware before the next World Cup.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's something that could work out well for him too. Instead of having to commit to a whole other 4 years, let's give it another year, another 2 years, whatever, and see if it works. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. We don't really, I think, know what he wants to do. He's kind of said all the right things in the press conference, and so in all the press conferences and whatnot. But he may just be ready to go back to a club, and he may just need a couple weeks to just figure that out. You mentioned some of these upcoming events for the U.S. men's national team. That's the last thing I want to talk about here is, all of us fans were bummed. The World Cup is over. But what's next for this U.S. men's national team? What do we have to look forward to? What will you be looking forward to in the weeks, months, years ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think I tweeted it out last night. I think I had the countdown already until Nations League quarterfinals. Just because I didn't kind of want that summer schedule to end. It was exciting. It brought a lot of belief. And now you go into that period, like you said, players are gonna go on, a holiday break and then get back with their clubs. Christian Pulisic already talked about, now he can get some rest. And then before he goes back to Milan, gets ready for preseason. Pochettino is going to take some weeks off before he, makes his decision. So yeah, so we have the next European season right around the corner. I know August should start up that for a lot of teams over in England and so forth. For the national team, no real schedule out yet for what's gonna come. I imagine there will be September friendlies, October friendlies, because the Nations League schedule will be in effect in September and October for a lot of the lower ranked teams that are going to have to go through this schedule to make the quarterfinals, which will be in November. The top four teams in CONCACAF, based off their ranking, will get a straight bye to the quarterfinals, which as of right now it'll be Mexico, Canada, the USA, and Panama. I don't see any of them dropping out of their top four spots in the next FIFA rankings, which will come after the World Cup. So I believe it goes by that. So I don't see them dropping out. So if those four automatically go to the quarterfinals, then the next competitive match for the U.S. won't be till November. It'll be same format, home and away, two legs, and then the final four will be next March, 2027. Then we have the Gold Cup. Curious to see how that goes. Whether it's an A team, whether it's a B team, whether it's a mixture of those. and then qualifying gets underway. Believe it's fall 2027, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's it.
So, so yeah, and then that'll obviously carry through into 2028 Copa America. Another big opportunity for them. They obviously had that. That was Greg Berhalter's last competition in charge before he was let go. Big opportunity to play against some of the best there, and then and then we'll before we know it, we're going to be talking about 2030 World Cup. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just really excited. I always love when the national team's back in action. It's always fun to break down the rosters, break down the new players that are in. I'm curious to see who they get in September and October for those friendlies. If it's Pochettino or whoever's going to be the new guy in charge, how they kind of balance these friendlies, right? Because we saw that with Berhalter in the past. I remember it was leading up to 2022. He was scheduling all these teams from different federations to try to get a good look at everybody. I'm curious to see how that goes, and will they schedule some big boys? Because you're going to have the UEFA Nations League going on at the same time, so it's going to be maybe a little tough to book an England or Spain or a Belgium or a France during those windows. So so that's what's on the horizon. But yeah, it'll be here before we know it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, this September October window is interesting because they've combined the window. It's September 21st to October 6th. So now it's a 4-match FIFA window. They could have up to 4 friendlies if they wanted. It's hard to imagine, they haven't named any of those, like you said. It's hard to imagine, I don't know, being too fired up for those because it's, everyone's going to be coming off the World Cup. I mean, we may have, if Pochettino doesn't come back, there's probably a good chance we're going to have an interim coach, for that. But maybe it's a chance to start reaching into the player pool and bringing some of these younger players up that you think could be the future, for 2030. I would like to see the U.S. get back to being number one in CONCACAF. Mexico has taken that from us. They've won, I don't know how many, 3 competitions in a row, I think, 2 Gold Cups in the Nations League maybe. I think that's important for our growth as a footballing nation, is to dominate our region. And I thought we were kind of heading in that direction with Greg. Now we've fallen off. And so I would like to, we're going to have the Nations League in March, like you said, 2027, and the Gold Cup next summer. That's 2 opportunities to win, 2 trophies. The Copa America, from what I understand, we're still waiting for an official announcement on that. Right? We don't know for sure if we're going to get in it. We don't know for sure where it's going to be, but it looks like there's a good chance from the reporting so far that it could be the U.S. hosting that again. I think that's, to me, if I look at what's the number one most important thing for us preparing for the 2030 World Cup, it's getting into the Copa America, because I just think that's such an important touch point for how we're doing right at the halfway point, the World Cup cycle. It's a huge tournament, and I would like to see us try to get in that every single edition, because I just think it's so important for us to just have an extra big competition like that, on our slate. And then the one other thing I'll mention is, you kind of alluded to it, the European season is going to be starting up. There's the summer transfer window. We don't know where some of these players, these U.S. players, are going to end up. There's talk of Balogun transferring somewhere. There's talk of Pepe transferring somewhere. There's even been talk of Pulisic transferring somewhere. He's, his contract is still kind of uncertain with AC Milan. And so we're going to be getting some answers to that over the next month. And so I'm looking forward to that as well. All right, Larry. Well, I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI Soccer. Man, for so long, you and I, we've been talking about the 2026 World Cup. For the last 3-4 years since I've known you, we're always talking about getting to it, how it's going to go, and now it's over. And that feels kind of weird, but I'm looking forward to, hey man, let's start talking about 2030. Me and you.
Let's go. Let's go. I was gonna go hide in the closet until 2030, but I guess I'll hang around with you for a couple more years.
Yeah,
No,
let's.
I'm excited. It'll be fun. Yeah, it's sad now. It's disappointing now. Obviously, we want this team to win everything they can and do the country proud. So yeah, I'm excited for what's to come, and yeah, the new Americans Abroad season was less than a month away, so I can't wait to see what that comes for the players, and then also how that helps the U.S.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Larry. I appreciate it. All the discussions we've had over this past couple of years getting ready for the World Cup. And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X or Blue Sky at Frank Garza 007, and I'll be back soon with a new episode.